Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Freeman has been involved in Africa for about 30 years. He is a researcher, writer, and speaker on a variety of topics concerning Africa. Here, Mr. Freeman joined AHADU Radio and Television. So, welcome to today's meeting again, Professor. Do you think that what will be the solution between Somaliland and Ethiopia?
I suspect that it will be a discussion. It's a very interesting issue. One is that Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is correct in stating that Ethiopia needs ownership, long-term ownership, in a port for the expansion of the Ethiopian economy. He's correct. Now, they need long-term ownership. That is, you need 50 or 100-year lease. Why do you need a long-term ownership? Because Ethiopia people will not invest in the transportation corridors to the port and the modernization of the port if it's not long-term. Ethiopia is one of the largest economies in Africa. It's the largest economy in East Africa. And people inside Ethiopia, because I get criticized by a lot of people, and in the neighboring countries don't understand physical economy. It's simple. For me, it's simple and clear. If the Ethiopian economy has a growing development, if Ethiopia grows, the whole region grows. Eritrea grows. Somalia grows. Somaliland grows. Kenya. This is an extension of regional integration, which we're seeing already from the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which is exporting electricity to 3 countries, Sudan, Djibouti, and Kenya already. So that we're looking at a growth of regional integration as a result of port development and expansion and access to Ethiopia. Now, the problem is Somaliland is very unique. It was a British protectorate. It became independent in 1960. It voluntarily joined Somalia, which was under the colonial powers of Italy. It voluntarily joined Somalia to become the Republic of Somalia. And 30 years later, in 1991, it separated itself. It has its own army. It has its own government. It has its own currency. It has stable elections, relatively. But it made this agreement back in 1961. So technically, it's still part of Somalia, but it's almost a separate country. However, it's not recognized as a separate country. So it's complicated. And it's complicated because of colonialism, because one part was under British protectorate or UN protectorate, and another part was under Italian colonialism. So nations didn't have the opportunity to develop in a natural way. Only Ethiopia was uncolonized. There's not going to be a war. People who talk about a war are damn fools, and they're dangerous fools. There are right now Ethiopian troops in Somalia defending the government against al-Shabaab. And no one's going to have a war. And the people who speak of war are enemies of Ethiopia and enemies of the Horn of Africa. We have to look towards practical steps towards development. So Somaliland has to be resolved by discussion. It's legitimate issues that have to be solved. But we don't need damn fools going around talking about war, because that's not going to help. And we have to understand economics, physical economics, to address the serious question of Ethiopia having access to a port for long-term development.
What is the solution? Thinking about or acknowledging Somaliland as a nation, or taking a port from Somaliland? What will be the advantage of Ethiopia?
I think people have to recognize that it's in the advantage of all the countries, the nations of the Horn of Africa, Somalia, Somaliland, Djibouti, Eritrea, and Ethiopia. For Ethiopia to continue to develop as a major economy, It is in all of the other nations will benefit if they think instead of reacting. They think about economics. The actual decision of where Ethiopia gets a port has to be resolved by discussion among sovereign countries of Africa. It's not for me to decide. They should have a port. If they get a port development project for a long-term lease, that will benefit all the nations. So if everybody was thinking clearly, they would say, okay, how can we carry this out? Now, the Somaliland question has to be discussed among the leaders of the nations of that area. But in the long term, if Ethiopia has a port, it will lead to development. But the sovereignty question, because Somaliland is unique. There's no other country like that has actually been operating as on its own, as if it was a nation for the last 30 years, but yet not recognized. So it's a delicate issue which should be settled by diplomacy.